So, hello and welcome to the Empowering Law Firm Leaders podcast, where we'll be talking to experts across the legal sector to discover the mindsets, behaviours, skills, and digital tools that are needed to run a successful modern law firm. I'm Amy Bruce, host and head of marketing at Osprey Approach. And today I'm joined by the author of The Agile Law Firm, co-chair of the Bristol and Bath Legal Tech Network, former chief operating officer for Osborne Clarke, and has since held several senior leadership positions for other UK and global law firms, and now principal at Edge International Consultancy Business, Chris Ball. Welcome, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Amy.
So today we'll be discussing what your law firm will look like in 2030 and what you need to do to prepare and develop now in order to succeed. We'll cover what changes and innovations are expected in the sector, how that impacts you now and then. We'll also discuss the most effective ways to spend your tech budget, how to demonstrate ROI, and the importance of the legal ops role for long-term success. So thank you so much, Chris, for joining me again. You did previously join us on our Build Better Habits series. At the time, we discussed how to become an agile digital-first law firm, and today we'll be exploring the importance of tech, operations management, and agility in more detail. But for those who perhaps didn't see that episode, do you mind just starting with your background and your experience and what's led you to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. Good to see you again, Amy. Good to be doing this again. Thanks for having me back. Shame on you, anybody who hasn't watched the previous episode.
Of course.
Go back and find it. It's fantastic. So look, a little bit about me. You know, where do I come from? Where did I get all this stuff from? So I've been working in the legal sector for it's over 25 years. I'm starting to get to that point where I kind of make it a bit vague how long it is. Although people can probably look at me and work it out. So long time in the legal sector, but I've also worked in quite a lot of other professional financial service businesses. I've worked for all four of the big four accountants consultants, which is the worst dinner party opening line you can think of, really. But I cut my teeth in law in a long stint. You've already mentioned it with Osborne Clarke, chief operating officer, chief executive, and then with one of the kind of real trailblazer outsourcing companies in legal, a company called Integrium, and then decided that it was time to resume what had been a management consulting career. So way back in 2011, I kind of started management consulting, started working with the international group of strategy consultants at Edge, and we've been kind of doing that ever since. Developed my management consulting portfolio with a focus around strategy, change, transformation. But yeah, because I've kind of got this chief operating officer hat that I'd worn in quite a few roles, it's very practical stuff typically, and I'm fascinated by, and hopefully have been able to help a lot of firms with how do you take technology and process, the classic people process technology triangle, and how do you apply that to a law firm in what is now the 2020s. Still enjoy doing that, and as you mentioned, that little roll call at the start. I spend quite a lot of my time chairing different groups, just trying to bring communities of people together with a similar interest, chief operating officers, people in legal tech, people who work in law firm, workplace and operations roles, etc. So that's me. I've written a bit of stuff. So we mentioned the Agile Law Firm. That's the most recent bit of a painful process writing a book. So there may be another one, there may not, but it still seems to stand the test of time. I produced it just about as we were coming out of COVID and the lockdown period, and it was an attempt to do what we're talking about today, which is try and think about what law firms will look like in 2030 and what all types of firms need to be thinking about, need to be addressing. So that was me. That's what I've done. And we can jump into the content of it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do want to jump into just some takeaways. Perhaps people only have 5 minutes to stay with us today. I really hope they stay till the end. But if they've only got 5 minutes, from your experience and everything you've done working with law firms, what would you say are your 3 top lessons you've learned about what it takes to run a successful modern law firm?
Yeah, I'm gonna put the emphasis on the modern because I think that is important. And depending on what the challenge, question, project is, of course, the 3 things will differ. There's a lot of things, but I guess I've learned over a long time. Three things, and this kind of comes back to the work I did around Agile and what are the attributes of a really successful modern law firm. I'll pick 3 things out, and we might come back. I know we will come back to a couple of these. So this is, if you've got 5 minutes, this is kind of your 5 minutes takeaway, but also hopefully it's an appetite whether and taster. So stay and hear more about these things. The first thing is being client centric. And it's a tough thing to sort of get into in a minute with people, because we work in an industry where the vast majority of businesses and firms and individuals say, I am absolutely centered on my clients. I'm client focused. Clients are first. And you see it in strap lines of most law firms. And I think there's a lot of truth in it. I'm not somebody who's here to throw stones at it. Being client centric is different. And that's very much something, I've learned over the years, and is born out of looking at other businesses in other sectors, and being obsessed by the client, your current clients, your future clients, how they're evolving, what they really want, what success looks like for them. What are they trying to achieve? What are the jobs they're trying to get done? And building that into every part of your business and your organization. And one of the things I challenge firms with quite a lot is, if you say that clients are right up there, you're client centered, how do you measure success? What do you celebrate? What do you reward people for? And as you can imagine, most of the listeners and viewers can imagine, 9 times out of 10, that isn't. What we do is we focus really hard on, have you done a great job for the client? Have you added value for the client? Are they going to come back again? Actually, it's probably financial, or it's how many hours you've done, or it's productivity. So that's one of the tests, and it's a test that a lot of firms probably would say, we're not there yet. We're trying. Maybe we'll try and bring more of that in. And there's a related test to it, and I think it's interesting in this world. We'll talk about this a bit, I'm sure, where what a law firm looks like. It could be a whole range of different things. Limited company, group, private equity owned, a platform, a consulting type business. And the thing I really now challenge firms on is, how far will you go to remake your model, add things, take things away, diversify, become a tech company, whatever you need to do to satisfy those clients, because that's what the great companies do. That's what they're always doing. So client centricity, definitely one. The other one I'd pick out, which is one of the other attributes in the Agile book, and what law firms should be doing, is restless, radical, and challenging. So that's 3 words, that's cheating. But it's just trying to get over a mindset. And the mindset is not the mindset that we associate with a lot of law firms, which would be not that broadly, almost like, well, that sounds dangerous. We're lawyers, we don't want to do that. And again, I'm not suggesting that we throw everything up in the air and everybody goes chasing after, big adventures and invest their money in strange new ways. But I think it's a mindset that's essential to the 2020s and beyond. Take nothing for granted. Never say, we've always done it this way. Never say, we're lawyers and we're different and we can't do it the way other businesses can do it. I love this, because I can challenge those things all the time. Till the cows come home, I can go, whoa, you said this 3 times. So why? The way you've always done it may be the best way, but do it because it's the best way, not because it's the way you've always done it. Don't do things because you think that lawyers have to do it that way. Those days are gone. And it's taking a while, I think, for the profession and the industry to catch up with that. The danger is some people have caught up with it. They're the people who are radically bringing different models, different applications, products, models of company into the market. And there's a real risk at the moment with AI just adding an extra inflection point, that the competition is going to outpace firms unless they're willing to say, we are curious and we're willing to do just about anything. We'll come back to the next point, within our values and our purpose, to remake our firm. And so the third one, this is a bit of a cue, I know we're going to talk about this in a little while, is to have a unifying purpose. And the point there is related to, a lot of people will have seen, read, watched the TED Talks of Simon Sinek, and Start With Why. And that's been hugely influential the last 10 years on all sorts of people. And I think his premise is hugely valuable and relevant to law. Why are we here? What matters to us? How do we, this firm, make a difference? Why? I sometimes say to partners who are sat around a table having a discussion about their strategy or something about their firm with me, I said, just think about, why are you all here together? Why are you in business together? What do you want to achieve? And dig a bit deeper. But you'll know, Amy, we've talked about it before, the Agile concept has a lot of autonomy pushed down to the teams at the front serving the clients. And we have firms now that have multiple offices, lots of different practices. We have hybrid working. People are more dislocated and disconnected in some ways. So it's ever more important to know, what are we trying to do here? Why are we here? How do we do it? and what unifies us all. Otherwise, we're just a kind of, barely connected group of individuals. So we'll come back to that one. So there's three things. So that was client-centric, restless, radical, and challenging mindset, and then having that unifying purpose.
Yeah, what a great start to the conversation. And I love that a potentially tech-heavy conversation has started with no tech points, because ultimately it doesn't matter what tool you use. If you don't have those things in place, you're never going to be able to reach your goals. I think my favorite two words ever, professionally and personally, are curiosity and be radical. I love those words so much. And I think that plays a huge part in all of those points that you've just said and that we're going to mention, is that if you're not curious to be better, do better, if you're not willing to put yourself out there and experiment, which isn't necessarily what we associate with the legal sector, then not only are your clients not going to be happy, but like you said, you're going to get competitors who are going to take over the market and do that and go beyond you. So I think that's a great start and a great hook for the rest of this conversation. In our previous conversation, we talked through the principles in your book of being an agile law firm, and actually you said that whilst that's the attributes of being an agile law firm, actually it's just the attributes of being successful in 2030. So we will focus on a few of those, but I just wanted to start with your key topic in your recent We Are Legal Tech Festival, which is the legal ops role. Can you share your insights and maybe your predictions on the importance of the legal ops role in 2030?
Yeah, I can give it a go, and I'm going to put a caveat here for any of my friends in legal ops who are watching this. So yeah, I'm not in legal ops, I guess, and there are now so many people, as you come across a lot of them who are doing full-time legal ops roles of some sort, and changing that world at pace from the inside. Fantastic army of people we've got now working in these roles, and they would probably all define it slightly differently. So I'll have a go at just a definition to start off with, because it is confusing. And you mentioned we ran it. So we did our Bristol and Bath Legal Tech Festival earlier this year, yeah. And we had a session, I think we had a couple of sessions actually on legal ops. I also shared quite a few panels on legal ops and where it is today at various conferences the last couple of years. So really, legal ops as a phrase sort of started out in in-house legal teams, corporate legal operations, as a kind of novel idea, really, that in-house legal teams would introduce operations people who were not lawyers necessarily, some were, to help them manage what was very sophisticated, large-scale, complex legal functions, often without the kind of infrastructure that a law firm has. And those people were, to some extent, managing things like legal project management and pricing, and they were basically trying to get better value from internal and external, and the law firms who serve them. Inside law firms, the few things happened. One is you ended up with a kind of mirror image. US firms in particular said, well, if they're going to have these people and they're asking us difficult questions about pricing and value-based billing and analytics, analysis of time, and how we use tech, then we're going to have to kind of face that up. So a lot of the original legal ops people in law firms were focused on pricing and e-discovery and how to use technology to sort of manage that side of it. But it seems to have become now much more of a general label. It's not universally used. So the explosion of people inside law firms in the last 5 years plus who do roles which might have innovation, transformation, client technology, legal tech in their role. Legal engineering seems to be a real favourite, and maybe that one's going to come up and become more recognised. Has come, I think, from a slightly different place, although they're now often kind of fused together and connected. And that's been the sense that we can genuinely apply technology to and process and improvement, but really technology to the legal services we deliver. And that whole concept of partly what we do as legal service providers is no longer now just we talk to people and we have meetings and we deliver documents. It could be an app, it could be a platform, it could be a bespoke tech solution to our clients' needs. And there are, as hordes of people. That sounds, hordes is not a very positive word, is it? Great ranks of people coming into that area. I think it's incredibly important, and it's one thing we found. Sometimes there's tensions in firms. You and I probably both see this a bit between the more conventional IT function and some of these people who are popping up, and a lot of them are lawyers in the legal ops, legal innovation, legal engineering space. They're often given quite a lot of initial influence, power, authority, can help us to become a more tech-focused law firm, help us to deliver tech solutions to clients. I felt very sorry for a lot of great tech departments and IT departments and law firms who, have been doing fantastic work. They're pulling their firm by the ear kind of forward for 10, 15, 20 years to suddenly find that there's another team of people not part of the same organization who have been told, you've got resources and budget to kind of do something exciting and sexy and with client technology. Firms have struggled a bit to make that work, and I think that's a shame because there's just incredible talent in IT departments, in law firms, so much experience. But I do still think the development of these legal ops roles is incredibly significant. The numbers are getting crazy. You mentioned we did Bristol Bath Legal Tech. So we're in one region of the country, albeit a very big legal market, very successful, very progressive. But we have firms in our group there with over 30 people in their legal ops, legal engineering team. Not in IT, that's totally separate. Mixture of lawyers, technologists, people straight out of university, people with kind of design thinking, legal design capability. And I do think we need those blended skills. I've done a bit of work recently with firms who are working together on a kind of early careers intervention, so working with schools and colleges and universities to sort of bring more people in, more diverse group of people into the legal sector. And one thing we're all emphasizing now is what you thought of as a career in law is probably going to look totally different. So this is now an option we're putting in front of people. Work in legal ops, work in legal engineering, work in legal tech. You might have done a law degree. You might even decide you want to spend a few years practicing as a lawyer. But this is now a valid route, which will be, could be really attractive and really remunerative. And so I think it's got to that point where we're now looking and saying, this is a real career path. Whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a technologist, whether you're coming in from outside with some other discipline. So very excited about it. The question that we might touch on in a bit is, that's great if you're a big law firm and you can afford, attract, appeal to those people. There's a bit of a war for these people. There's a war for talent here. If you're an SME firm, it's a big investment. Just have one of those people, and how do you tap into that? And actually, in an SME firm, your IT team may not necessarily have all the skills. Your head of IT director might have some of those skills, but that person is almost certainly massively overloaded. So how are you going to do this? And I think we'll touch on this as we look at what SME firms can do next. But overall, my definition of legal ops, quite broad, is it is really significant. It's a career path. It's now an established element of how law firms are developing and competing. And it's very exciting. They're great people to spend time with, I think, because they're the people who I think are at the ground level changing the way law works. Which is great.
It's so exciting. They're the key problem solvers, aren't they, in the industry? And they're the people who are going to shake stuff up. It got me thinking that you mentioned about the SMEs at the end there. I think a lot of the time, a practice manager or an office manager is often amalgamated into several different hats and roles, and ultimately probably a bit of legal ops, a bit of legal tech. How can one person manage all of that? Surely that's an impossible task we're putting on people.
I think it is. I think that the thing I'm starting to see, particularly with some of the groups that I work with or chair, is that the way this is perhaps going to develop is those people, many of them will say, this is, we touched on it a minute ago, this is kind of exciting, this is important. I'd love to develop, more skills if I had more time. And really smart firms and aware firms will look and say, yeah, that person knows a huge amount about our firm, knows a huge amount about running a law firm, probably efficiently and on a fairly restricted budget, and all of those things. They ideally are quite client-centric, quite, think about clients, understand that element. We need to get them out from under the admin. And, this is where, again, you and your colleagues will appreciate this more than most. We can help them now, more than ever. There's a lot of stuff they're being asked to do they shouldn't be doing. And I can be quite brutal with law firms sometimes and law firm partners and say, you are asking these people, whether they're in finance, marketing, operations, admin, HR, you're asking them to do things that are just a waste of money and a waste of time. You're wasting their time. You're demanding this, demanding that. manual reports, lots of things that just say this can be done. The weight can be taken by systems now. All the work should be delegated down to another level. You've got to start freeing up some of this talent, even in smaller firms, to focus on the future of the firm and driving it forward. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that every practice manager wants to do that, has the capability to do that. Some of them are kind of loathe technology, as we know. Wish this was never introduced in the first place. But there's a lot of talent there, and of course we could bring in a lot of talent. But I do think firms have to really grasp now the efficiency nettle, and a beef I have. We might talk about it in a minute. I picked up this phrase of the last mile problem from BT Telecoms. The fibre network that we spread around the country is essential for our technological infrastructure. Worked really well rolling it out until you got to the local cabinet in your town, village, street, and then it's really hard to then get that fibre and that Wi-Fi out to every individual house. And I use that analogy a lot for digitization of law. We're almost there. Overall, the vast majority of our communication, of our documentation is done digitally, is shared digitally, is stored digitally. Different levels in different firms, as I'm sure you know. But there's a final mile problem. How do we finish that job and make sure that we're not still filing loads of paper, we're not still, typing notes out and printing them, and the pandemic gave us a big push in this direction, no doubt about it, accelerated it a long way. But there's still so many firms who are not yet there. They're not yet fully digital. And I always say to people, that doesn't mean you can't use paper. Paper's really helpful as an output used tactically. I'll tell you what, the best thing for us to do would be print this and share it. We need to take this to court, so we're going to have to print it. But everything is available digitally and stored digitally and accessible from wherever you are, subject to security, etc. And for me, that is really fundamental now. Firms don't grasp that in the next 18 months. I think any firm that hasn't grasped it and got to full digitization will be in huge trouble, because you can't build AI coming. All of the technologies that are coming through, you can't build them and use them unless everything is available digitally and you can access things from anywhere. So I think there's a fundamental job people now need to focus on and focus their people on.
Yeah, it's sort of cutting those final ties to the way we used to do it, and really going full throttle into the new way. And I mean, this is a conversation for another day, but it's being prepared for that and not waiting till the last minute until you've got no choice for whatever reason, because there's always mistakes that come from that. So that's a conversation for another day. But you're right with the potential in the legal ops role is that actually freeing that talent up. I mean, talent acquisition and retention is such a key challenge and topic in the legal sector, that is the way you're going to do it, is make people feel empowered and people feel valued, that they can contribute. I think the legal ops role is going to be very key for that. Moving into tech slightly more now. So loads of reports, the LPM Frontiers report, the Nexus Bellwether report have shown that SMEs are increasing their tech spend in the coming months, with many already have. Utilising the right tools is the key. It's the foundation to modern law firm. We've touched on that. But what's your experience on where the additional investments are going, and maybe where do you think they should be going instead to spend your tech budget? Are they being spent in the right places?
I think broadly they probably are, and we can't avoid the fact that investment in tech, cost of technology, is driven by inflation, as well as by more usage and more demand and greater utilization. So everything's more expensive, and tech is a lot more expensive. I mean, particularly I think the SaaS model is driving quite a lot of year-on-year costs, because we've seen quite a lot of big shifts in software as a service subscription prices. But frankly, everything is a lot more expensive year-on-year. So part of me is not skeptical at all, because I think firms are doing more with tech, but I think there's also a large part of it is, well, take inflation out of that, and the number will be slightly more realistic and lower. The other thing we can't avoid is artificial intelligence, Gen AI. I imagine it's only just starting to affect the figures. Some form of AI has been around for quite a while, and people have been touting it, but now it's not that long still since ChatGPT arrived, and that in itself isn't driving a huge cost because people will be using free versions or have limited numbers of licenses. I think where we're getting to today and into 2025, AI will be the big driver of law firm tech budgets because, well, fundamentally, Copilot, so Microsoft, it is going to cost you more money. Most people are going to do it and try it and then apply it across their firm. I've been on quite a few panels where I've asked panelists, Copilot, should firms do it or not? Quite rightly, panelists are quite, well, it depends, and it depends who they are. But actually, when given forced to do a yes or no, it's a yes. Yeah, people are going to do it. People are going to spend that money. That's a rise. And then your LexisNexis, Thomson Reuters, Westlaw subscriptions, again, very few firms will be able to resist the sense that that's an obvious thing to do. There's protection of some sort there in terms of the validation and verification of the data we're using. We're already using those tools. We're tied into them, and it's a very sensible step in many ways. I think to think, if you're thinking about what Gen AI can do as an assistant, that kind of sense of, I'm a lawyer. Eventually, the AI should make me feel like I've got a person or a team of people sat here doing stuff for me all the time. Doesn't mean I don't still need real people. But you're in an SME firm, you can't afford ranks of real people. And so this is a really interesting opportunity. And I do see that eyes light up sometimes when you get lawyers who previously are kind of thinking, I don't really get all this AI. I've tried ChatGPT. I don't really get what it does for me. And then you flip them into looking at some of these tools and thinking, this really could be very soon like having an extra person in my team or an extra two people in my team. And I can't afford an extra two people. This is not about getting rid of my lawyers. It's not about replacing lawyers. It's augmenting my capability. And I know, one of the things we've talked about quite a bit as in between all these calls is, how do SME firms compete? And I think that is a key area. And therefore, that's where money will go. I do think it's going to go on those tools. And, I'm sure most software businesses would hope as well that that same trickle down that goes, well, they're going to spend on 365 and on Copilot, they're going to spend on LexisNexis and Thomson Reuters, one or other or both. And if they're using my PMS, my case management system, we've also got tools for them which just will enhance and particularly tap into that. This is like having a little team of assistants working for me. And so I think that's where a lot of firms will start and are starting, and that's raising the spending in general. The other area that I do find a lot of people talking about, two areas actually. One is, I think there's a lot more interest in practice-specific tools and technologies. So there's some real recognition. I had a great conversation with a few people last week about this, that firms, that generic firm enterprise software is great. And there's consistency and there's economies of scale. But actually, we're all starting to say that private client work and family and company commercial and employment are different, and they're done in different ways. And there are some smart technologies there which embed some of that specific knowledge and can help us speed up those specific areas of practice. I'm seeing a lot of interest in that. I suppose it's a best of breed view. And then the other thing is business intelligence and analytics tools. Again, very linked to AI in some ways, but giving people a lot more insight and information. So I think a lot of areas that people are spending money on. I don't sense in recent years there's been a huge amount of waste, because I know you're digging away at that kind of people spending money on the wrong thing. I think there's a risk with the AI hype that people will end up with various cul-de-sacs of well, these people came in and they pitched this thing and it sounded really good and we got it, and there will be a few cases of letdown. And I think that's why, again, a lot of people will start with the names they know, start with the products that are going to be enhanced by AI, and that will allow them to get more value out of their existing investment. So I think that's probably a fairly sensible route.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting take that perhaps a lot of that increase in budget is actually just increasing the cost of the tech that they've already got. I think that's an interesting take that probably wasn't taken into consideration there. But I agree with you in that, I mean, we've just started to dabble in AI for our marketing capabilities and be able to create content at scale. And there's an art to it because you have to know how to interact with it to get the best from it. But when you nail that, you really do feel like you have a spare person and a spare pair of
Yeah.
arms. And it's like, it's a relief. And you're like, thank God for that, because I don't have the budget to hire. But yeah, here it is helping me out. So yeah, you really do feel like that. But that just links back to time. Everybody needs time to be able to invest in these things, to apply them correctly, to learn them correctly. Who's got the time to to be spending looking at these? Is that the legal ops role? Is that where that role is going to shine, or does it need to come from
Yeah,
the ground up?
I think it's got to be both. I think the legal ops role is critical to that. But again, we're back to the point we made earlier on that not every firm has anybody with that kind of role, and so find the talent in your firm and try and release some of it so they can focus on that. I think there's going to have to be some kind of ability for firms, SME firms, to tap into. And there's a lot of consultants out there at the moment doing this kind of work, or saying we can come and help you with this. There's always a bit of a shakeout to find out who are the people who can really help at the price point that you want, and they're kind of on call. I do think that there's going to need to be some of that support for firms that isn't, you don't have to have everybody employed. But that will help in a kind of legal ops role.
Yeah,
But you
fine.
said something there about skills as well that we might come on to in a minute. Actually, I think it's a really important point. But I'm also, I love from a marketeer's point of view, some of the best conversations I've had in the last 2 years about that immediate impact of generative AI have been with people in marketing roles, both marketing consultants and agencies, and people doing big jobs like yours inside companies or firms. It is quite transformational, isn't it? And exactly that sense of, this is like having an extra person. Our team can get a load more done now.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of, as I say, that's the kind of light bulb you want with lawyers, and I think that's what we should all be looking for, is that sense of that's what this is about to some extent in the short term.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the idea of using talent within your firm and giving them time. What we do at Osprey a lot of the time, the users that get the most success out of the solution is where they've got champions across the firm, because they've got someone that cares, someone that's perhaps passionate about tech outside of their role, and just really gets it, is innovative, is curious. And it's those people that then become infectious. And you don't always need someone heading that up. If you've got the influence from the ground up and they're influential enough and they're leaders in their own right, actually that can have just as much success for the firm as potentially hiring someone if that's not possible for you. Absolutely.
Yeah, really, really good point. And I think if you can encourage those people from wherever they are in your firm, your organisation, that'd be great. And encourage them, and really try hard not to discourage them or restrict them. And often that comes down to they're just something you already said. They just don't have time, and they're not rewarded or incentivized. So a lot of really good initiatives get ground down or come to a halt just because people have to focus on the client work, have to hit their chargeable hours, and we have to keep the engines of the firm running. And firm leaders need to really give that some thought, because they've got to get some time from these enthusiasts and champions, and they've got to focus on it, because otherwise you do that thing which is, again, we'll probably talk about it right at the end a little bit, but you focus on today and what next, and because we all do, what have I got on my to-do list, and what do we need to do this week, next month, and that's fine, and you keep the firm running. But are you looking at, where are we trying to get to in 2028, 2030? Where do we need to be? We need to be here. Well, you've got to work backwards as well, and actually the stuff you have to do now in 2024 to seed those changes, the stuff you probably had to do in 2023, and probably 50% of law firms didn't do it. And in 2024, maybe 40% of law firms still won't have done the things actually they need to do to be a successful organisation in 2030. And so firms have got to do that. Yeah, I've got to look from today and do what I need to do, what's on the list. Very important. But you've also got to look back and say, what are the things we've got to do to create the firm and create the competitive position and be in the right shape for the future? That's tough.
Yeah, and I think it was mentioned the link between success measures and how you're measuring success in your firm and how you're holding people accountable and how that aligns with your values. So are you trying to be innovative? If that's something that you hold of value, are you actually measuring success based on that for your team? That is, yeah, it's absolutely crucial. Just going back to the tech spend, again, in these same reports, even though the budgets are increasing, leaders feel like they can't represent ROI. Have you got
Mm.
any tips of how people can better represent the financial and also other benefits from investing in the tech?
Yeah, it's a great subject. I'm always fixated on ROI for well, all projects, but particularly for tech projects, you always set out what it is you're trying to achieve, but then put measures against those things. And that's not just we want a system in by this date. Actually, what are we trying to achieve in our business? And I practice management systems are a great example. I always encourage firms to put in financial improvement measures. So we're putting this in, and it will improve our financial performance because it should. Because we should be able to manage our revenues, bill more time, have less write-offs, collect cash faster, whatever it may be. So that's one tip. You always say, what are we trying to achieve here, and then set a measure against each one. Never say, oh, it's a tech project, we're just trying to replace something. Productivity is another one. I'm doing a bit of work on productivity in professional service firms at the moment, and one thing I'm trying to push back against is the assumption that what we mean by productivity is more chargeable hours per lawyer, because that's a very reductive idea of productivity, and just about every other industry would go, hang on, you're measuring as productivity people spending more time on things. The rest of us are measuring productivity as better value, less time, less time, less time is good. That's the name of the game. And law firms are already have been adopting and adapting to that brutal truth for a while. But frankly, we're still in large part focused on putting more time down, billing more time, doing more time. But productivity is really important. One way quite a lot of firms have done this, I've always encouraged it, is put in a project with technology or process and just try and measure. You probably have to do it through kind of questionnaires and so on. Measure how much time per week that gives back to your users, whoever is affected. So you can do this really well with fairly small changes, enhancements, upgrades. We're just going to change the process here. Small bits of technology. It becomes a bit of a big job if you're putting a whole new practice management system, but maybe chunk it out and say there are 3 big changes we're putting in place here. Each one we're going to do a bit of a kind of control test. People love to know that they've had X hours back. What they do with those hours, that's a separate question. But we're all fighting, aren't we, with way too many things to do, too much bureaucracy, too much admin, and we want time back in our lives for whatever, client work or home time or whatever. So I think that's really, really important. Lots of firms are now fully engaged in measuring profitability by team, by partner, by matter, client, type of work type, practice group, whatever. I've been banging this drum for 25 years. I'll be banging it forever, I suspect. You must measure profitability at every level. You must consider it to be more important than revenue as a measure, even if you haven't quite, moved all your remuneration processes. And profitability is a great measure of this ROI. So we've done this. We've done this for this particular type of work or this practice group. How is it going to affect profitability? It should be aiming to improve it. And then the other thing, which is controversial because lawyers will always say to me particularly, is we can't measure that, is client satisfaction and client retention. We're client centric. Back to my very first point, we need to be client centric. Every single project needs a client focused objective and aim. What are we trying? In what way will this improve the client experience, the client journey, the client satisfaction, the sense they have of value? Define that upfront. Don't make these projects internal. This is kind of the legal ops people are good at breaking this apart, perhaps better than IT departments have been traditionally. They've been told that really it's about an internal view. Now we're much more focused on that. So have a client objective and measure it. So that's probably enough. But all of those things I think are quite important to do for ROI.
Yeah, absolutely. I love we've got the client element in there because ultimately, whether your internal processes have improved or whether it's your external portals that have improved, all of which will inevitably impact the client. And I actually think another thing to add there is employee satisfaction. Actually, does it give the employee more freedom to work from home, to feel like that they can get on with their job, that they've got the tools that they need to not stress? I mean, that's definitely something that needs tracking, but all of these need tracking over time. You can't just implement it be done with it. Hopefully it will show you itself that it's improved. It doesn't. It needs that time. It needs that goal set at the beginning and that continuous tracking to make sure that, yeah, you can define that value and what that means. And yeah, I love that it spans across all those. We did touch on it from the legal ops role, but it can feel overwhelming for an SME that there's so much change going on, so many challenges that they need to be working on, and many can't afford to keep up necessarily. But I'm sure there's some large law practices or innovations that actually SMEs can take on and steal slightly, perhaps. I just wanted to know your opinions. I know you've worked in both sort of areas. Are there
Yeah.
any sort of large law practices they can steal?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's mindset and commercially and strategically how you focus on your firms. And I think, well, I won't go into more detail on that because I think we covered quite a lot of that early on. I do think there, larger firms, I'm going to say particularly in the UK, have approached things in a new way, a more commercial way, a more challenging, curious way than in the past. And a lot of SME firms have also done that and have, radically challenged the norm. And you can look at all sorts of firms who have come up with some really interesting models. So I'm not saying it's all about big firms, but the average SME law firm can look at big firms and say, well, what they're doing, a lot of it is just they're being challenging, they're changing their model, they're being ambitious, they're thinking really hard about how big do we need to be. And if there's any of my clients watching this, they'll be going, oh god, here we go. How big do you need to be to prosper and survive and thrive doing the kind of work you want to do? So back to purpose again. You want to do this, you want to do it for these kind of people in 2020, 25, 2030. How big do you need to be to do that? Size isn't everything, it isn't the big is beautiful, but there are costs to running businesses like this, and particularly with AI, and the cost of winning a client, actually getting out there and marketing and selling and winning clients, keeping clients satisfied at a certain level of performance. There's a lot that goes into that now, and there's also, maybe it should, maybe it shouldn't be there. There's often a sense for your employees and your people, your talent, that there's a certain weight added to we're this big or we're this big, and if they see firms around them getting bigger and more successful, and apparently the brand getting bigger, there's often a pull, saying, well, what's our firm doing? Are we stuck? So I really encourage firms to think, any firm of any size can do this. Where do we need to be? How big do we need to be? Why do we need to be that big? And I think the cut-off point, for where you can really run a successful firm with multiple practice areas keeps moving in terms of how big you need to be, revenue and number of people. But yeah, I think the other thing, which is just turning that on its head, that question is, we've touched on it a few times now. Big isn't always beautiful. Sometimes with smaller firms, smaller ownership groups, you can make decisions. You can be agile. It's much easier to pivot and make decisions and change. And often it feels less easy. It feels more conservative. But actually, one thing I always say to clients and people I talk with and work with is, it's a lot easier for you to make this call, make this decision, change direction, do something, than it is for the top 100 firms, the top 50 firms, the big global firms. Very difficult for them to do it. So seize that. What are you going to do with that? Where's your superpower? Well, my superpower is we're pretty fleet of foot and we're pretty agile. And then the other thing we've touched on, which I just want to keep putting in front of people, is AI and technologies of all kinds, but the ability of AI to plug the resource gap that smaller firms have. They just can't afford to keep going out and hiring qualified lawyers. Particularly when some firms are paying them 150,000 a year. So that's really difficult to keep plugging that resource in. AI is going to make a big difference to that. It won't level the playing field because the big firms have got AI too, but it can make your firm much more capable of delivering in the modern kind of era. If you can use that smartly and use that to augment your human resource. AI, of course, is not free, as we've already discussed, probably quite expensive, but it's much more available and you can use it much more cost effectively, I think we'll see, than lots and lots of people. So I think, and I talk a lot to mid-sized firms, you can compete in those ways with bigger firms.
Yeah, I think it's empowering, actually, that perhaps it's a mindset shift that can take you above and beyond. And yeah, just thinking, being more curious and being more innovative. And like you said, being agile, making decisions quicker, failing quicker, try something, experiment, it failed, let's try again. Having that cycle is much quicker in a smaller organization. And you touched on it in your first point about being client centric. I mean, we spoke about how they compete with large law firms, but actually I think looking at other businesses and how other sectors are successful and client focused actually could potentially have a bigger impact. I don't know what your thought is on that.
Yeah, I think both, but I think you're right, Amy. I do think there's as much, probably more to be learned from other businesses in other sectors, and I'm quite reassured, and maybe people listening to this who aren't, but because they think my firm's not doing this, I'm really pleased to see how much there is now of people within our sector looking outside, looking at business models, bringing people in from other sectors, particularly other relevant sectors. You know, it could be accounting, business to business services, it could be financial services, but you know, sometimes it's retail, tech, quite a lot, and you see some of the new models in law firms that are, you know, often directly evolved from models that have been used elsewhere. We got some fascinating things going on at the moment, I think, with kind of consolidators, and we've had them for many years. But this concept, Shakespeare Martineau, AMPA, as the group is called, used this phrase "house of brands" quite a few years ago about their strategy. You know, we are expanding our diversifying our range of services, we're adding new businesses, but not all of them are going to take the overall, you know, group, the overall same brand. And you think about all the other industries, think about Unilever and you know, P&G, people like that. They've got hundreds of brands. They don't kind of change each one as it comes in and say, you've got to call it this, you've got to call it that. And I think we're getting that in law. There's a fast-growing organisation called Lawfront, which is taking in a lot of law firms. They're keeping their identity and their brand and their name. There's one that's just been announced on a global front, an accounting business services company called Alvarez and Marsal, and they're now saying, well, we're going to add law to this and build a brand. But again, we'll have a lot of different names of company. So there's some great models that have been learned from other sectors, but the tech side, bring it back to tech, even more so. You know, that's where I think we're really seeing people look at how banking and some financial services, so things that are quite adjacent often, have been evolved in terms of tech and apps, and you know, being available anytime you want them to be, and saying, well, that's just something we can do in law. Why not? And one thing I always remind my clients of is, you talk about your clients, and you talk about your clients wanting this. You know, they want face to face. They want to sign things in person. The old ladies don't use technologies. That's all great, you know, and there's a lot of truth in that. There's no doubt about it. And people are looking for that kind of service. But your clients are not a static group of people. Literally, you know, some of them are dying, and some new ones are coming through, and the new ones coming through, and some of the, you know, older people you've known for years, their habits are changing, and what they see from their bank and their providers of different services and their TV streaming services and so on is affecting what they see as a good service or a bad service. And I think that's probably way more important than any specific legal, you know, service change we can come up with. Is we've got to constantly be plugged into what's happening in the wider world.
Yeah, looking at that client experience aspect of it, not just necessarily the legal services, but how we want to, you know, have services provided to us. The Unilever sort of model is interesting, and I think it actually emphasizes how powerful small SMEs and brands can be, because whilst that allows them to have the impact and perhaps the investment of, you know, compliance or marketing or tech, actually what it does do is show the importance of having the smaller team who knows their clients, who knows their sector, who are absolute experts and have built that brand. And actually I think that model shows that that's super important, and that is your superpower. If you've built that over 30 years, you know your sector inside out, you're experts, you know how your clients like their service delivered. If you do that well, then you're onto a winner, and that model shows that's definitely the key. All of this requires continuous improvement, and I know that's one of your attributes. That's how you experiment and fail fast. How can leaders encourage that within their teams? We know, like we said before, it's not necessarily what you'd expect from a law firm or a legal professional. They've brought up to be perfect, and not like that's not how they've been taught to behave. So how can you encourage that and pull that out of people?
A few things. I think it comes from the top. In part, so we talked about earlier, and you mentioned, you know, there are champions and advocates dotted all around the firm for change and tech. So encourage them, but the people at the top have to be positive about change. They have to be. I think folks coming into firms now as lawyers or in other roles, particularly at the younger end, will look at leadership. You get a lot of feedback on leaders from various surveys now, and they're quite critical. Now, they used to be. It's no longer. There's no longer that kind of natural kind of respect and awe, and they want to see leaders and firms who are moving, who are constantly plugged into what they need to be doing next. So you have to do that as leaders. I've said to some, typically older, very senior, very effective groups of partners in leadership roles in firms, just remember, make this a bit easier for you. You don't have to do it all. Maybe you'll never get generative AI. Maybe you'll never really understand it. Maybe you're terrified by, the post-COVID hybrid working environment. You don't really understand how it works. You don't want to work that way. So use people in your firm, use other people to take the lead on some of these things. Let them at least develop the thinking, encourage, more junior people to get engaged and get involved. I often say brutally, you're not going to be here in 2030 running this firm. You plan to retire in 3 years, 2 years, 5 years. So you're not going to be the leaders of the firm doing this. Naturally, your interest and motivation is going to be slightly less, but don't hold your firm back as a result. Just drop some of these things and get some other people involved. I think that's really important. Training is very important. I think you mentioned skills earlier on. We are, and you also asked me a question, what are we not investing enough money in? Where are people misinvesting? Training is appalling, I think, at the moment. It's not law firms' fault. It's worldwide, every sector. How do you get people engaged? Concentration levels, not being there in person. There's loads of challenges. Just the amount of things we need to learn, but we must help people become really good users of technology, really good managers of their own time and their own life. And that involves an investment in training, which frankly, even big firms aren't doing very well. I think I look at tech training budgets and so little is spent on individual personal use and being effective as an individual. And I think that's key. And you mentioned things around design thinking, things like, just how to empathize, iterate, the concept of a minimum viable product. I know you said to me before, people trying to be perfectionists. Lawyers want to get everything right, and the idea of an MVP is the opposite of that. Get it to a point where it's viable, key, really important, and then give it a go, try it, iterate it. That's partly attitude, but also I think it's skills. You've got to actually train people on that. You can't just say to people, change the way you think. You've got to dig that in. So, and performance management is the final thing. It's one of my beasts for 30 odd years of my career. I'll always look at performance management. How you set people's objectives, if you do, how you talk to people about what's good and what's bad about their performance, how you help them with training and development, how you reward them. And way too often firms are saying one thing or a load of things here. We're going to do this. We're going to change this. This is really important. People are important. Clients are important. And over here, what you're telling them and what you're measuring and what you're rewarding is time and fees, not even profitability. For me, I can, I've got to this age, I can be brutal with people. I say that's nonsense, and I don't care if you say, well, it's what worked okay so far. I will be able to look at your firm in depth if I had the time to say it hasn't. It's worked okay, maybe, but it hasn't. You haven't maximised your performance by doing that. It's lazy. Lawyers are just a bit lazy when it comes to what they measure. Income revenue was only ever a proxy for profitability, but now we can measure profitability. So why don't we measure profitability? There's a bit of a transition to manage with that, and it's really difficult things. But we've got to shift to aligning all the things, particularly those really big things: status, pay, profitability, and with what we say is important, which I guess comes to purpose.
Absolutely, and that is what we're going to touch on in just a second. But that just reminded me of a quote from Simon Sinek, who said, in businesses, we measure productivity because it's easy, because there aren't easy measures to determine someone's trust. And I was speaking to, I think it might have been Sean Jardine, about why people get promoted who are big billers and big fee earners, but actually they've got a bit of a toxic culture that seeps throughout the firm. And a lot of the time it's because those measures of success that sit outside of productivity are really difficult to manage or really difficult to set. Once you've decided on them, they're quite easy to track, but they're not as easy or as standard to track productivity. So that makes a lot of sense as to why you need to determine what your success measures are based on the value set that you've got. And I guess that leads me very nicely to, is having a purpose fluff? Do we really need purpose, or is it just, marketing fluff?
Yeah, well, that would really blow it if I said, yeah, it's just fluff.
I really hope you don't.
No, it's not. It's not just fluff. And with what I said at the start of this, for anybody who's still with us, and what I said in the book, it was my final attribute, this unifying purpose, and it was final. It was the end not because it's the least important, because in many ways it's the most important. If you don't have it, and you running what law firms are anyway, is a collection of individuals, teams, practices, officers doing quite different things. Practically, you've got to have something which pulls everybody together. And I'm not convinced that the strapline on your website or your kind of one-page strategy plan is that thing. So what is it that we all understand? We're all quite different, doing different things, but we all understand that why we're here and what our organization is trying to do and what we're collectively trying to achieve is that, and that's the most important thing for us. And these are the values, and this is how it will look when we achieve that kind of a bit of a vision thing. So I think there's a practical thing to it, which is how do you bring all these disparate people together and keep them on track and so on. And then there's a strategic, particularly in a time of change. How do we change? How do we move in concert? Well, something you just mentioned, we take our purpose and our values. What are we here for? What are we trying to achieve? How will the world know that? And we align every part of what we do with it. So, we don't have things which actually appear to utterly contradict it. We don't have people who appear to be not playing by those rules at all, who are prospering and doing really well in the firm. And those things are always tough, but that's relatively simple. But there's a final element, and it's kind of the word purpose, a bit like legal ops, but on a bigger scale, is defined in lots of different ways. I'm giving it quite a practical kind of thing. Everybody in every organization has a purpose. You don't always articulate it very well. You haven't necessarily surfaced it. And sometimes when you do, you realize it needs a bit of work and you've got to kind of really put it together. But purpose today, and even since I wrote the book, it's changed a bit. It's morphed a bit, and now it does get a few things thrown at it, because I think it's seen as I'm going to use that word, woke. It's sometimes thrown. Yeah, that's what gets thrown at it. Oh, it's one of those things. It's kind of purpose, not profit. And I think profit should flow from purpose. I genuinely believe that. Even I look at some really smart people writing about purpose now, and they're talking. I think they're trying to convince people by saying it's purpose and profit. We're going to balance the two. And I think even that's missing the point. I think it's about understand your purpose, engage people with it, get people enthused by it, live by it, do it well. And profit is the consequence of that. Yes, you have to manage that and steer it, but that's the consequence. It's not kind of I balance purpose and profit. They're two different things. But I think purpose just has that little element. Gen Z in particular, people coming into law firms and every other type of business saying, "What are we about? Why should I join you? Why are you different? Why do you earn? How do you earn my allegiance, my loyalty?" If you're just going to say, "Well, we're a law firm." We're really high quality. Look at all these big clients we've got, and we earn this much money. That's going to not be enough for most people today, or most people in below the age of 30, and that's only going to grow and grow. Which is why environmental, social governance, sustainability, diversity are all really big topics on agendas now. So there's an element of purpose which has got a bit of definition around it. It's kind of and don't tick the boxes. Don't purpose wash. Don't say, okay, Chris, that was a really good list. We're just going to have to tick those boxes on our website and we're done. It's that what are you doing for your people and your community and your clients? How are you delivering that as a law firm, legal business? So yes, I think it's incredibly important anyway, always has been, to glue organizations together. I think it's particularly important now because we're going through a period of change. And what people are looking for is to find a home which has purpose and that they agree with. And I think law firms are going to be well placed to do that, strangely enough, because we work in an area of equality and fairness and justice. And there's a lot of people who already do a huge amount of things, pro bono work, etc. And that are very community minded. And some things about the legal industry get in the way, but I think we can overcome that, and we can overcome that with the help of technology as well. I think that's the other good point. I think technology really helps some of this stuff, and helps us connect and kind of drive our purpose forward.
There's so many things I want to unpack for that, and we're running out of time. But I think, as you said, the younger generations, Gen Zers, are more brutal on their leaders. And if they don't believe their leaders are aligning with their values, they're not going to waste their time on it, and they'll find someone else that is. A lot of the events I attended this summer, there's been a lot of talk about B Corps, a lot of law firms looking into the B Corp, because and what I've heard is that it's not hard to get a B Corp accreditation for a law firm, because a lot of the time you don't have heavy like supply chains, and it's fairly easy to do practically. But actually what it does is it very clearly shows what we stand for, and shows that we want to be better and be a better firm and contribute to our society. And yeah, the younger generations care because they want to be aligned and they want to feel that connection. And ultimately what I think value and purpose does is it breeds trust, because what you can then do, if you all truly believe in the collective purpose, it allows you to allow those tech champions or the marketing directors or the C-suite outside of the partnership to be trusted to do what they need to do, utilize their expertise to get to the single purpose and the single goal. So I think personally purpose allows for trust, and then that further empowers and embeds and makes people want to stay, essentially. Which is a huge challenge for law firms. To end our conversation, I'm sorry we are running out of time, I could talk to you all day, but what would be the priorities for firms to review and develop now to make sure they thrive in 2030?
Let's turn that question on its head. I'd ask firms, which is kind of related to purpose, what will you be and what you need to be and what you want to be in 2030? It's not that far away. People can see it now, but it's far enough away for people to kind of think, okay, it's still a future challenge. So answer that question. Not easy. I spend a lot of time with people kind of digging around it. How do you answer that question? Where do you want to be? Who do you want to be? How will you expanded and developed your purpose and your aim and your mission by 2030? Right. Okay. That's it. That sounds great. Now work backwards. What do you need to do by when? Because some of those illustrations and ambitions for 2030, involve quite a bit of change. Even if they look fairly incremental, there's a lot that has to happen between now and then. It's 5 years. It's now 5 years. That's all, and the clock is ticking. And so, okay, some things, people talk about, expansion. They talk about offices here and moving out of this place and changing their tech and adding in this new service. Those things take time. And there's things you have to be doing now, and as I said earlier, and last year and the year before. So that's the main thing I'm now saying to firms. We're all naturally programmed to go, what have I got to do today? What have I got to do this week? Work forward. Absolutely. Keeps us very busy. You have to have something coming the other way very practically, not just airy-fairy. We hope we'll be here. Manage it. Say, this is where we're going to be. This is where we want to be. Therefore, that's what will happen. What do we need to do? And I think that's the most important thing I can say to firms about that 2030 aspiration. Decide what it is quickly, work backwards.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what a great way to end. And I think just to bring it back to the attributes in your book about being agile while being just a modern law firm, think about those questions when you ask yourself what you want to be and what you need to achieve, and align them to those attributes, and think about those areas that are going to need to be there for you to compete practically to all the other law firms that are out there. What a great way to end the conversation. Thank you so much, Chris, for your time and expertise. It's been really great to talk to you.
Brilliant, Amy. Always a pleasure.